Okay, so this is the story that everyone wanted me to talk about. That has been popping off. Jimmy Carter is dead. Jimmy Carter is fucking dead. He passed. He's gone. No, don't 07 him. Wait, don't hold on. Don't you 07. Don't 07. Because people seem to have the wrong perception of who Jimmy Carter actually is. And what he actually did. Do you know that Jimmy Carter directly funded Pol Pot? That he directly gave tons of money. Knowing what Pol Pot was doing, he gave a ton of money to Pol Pot specifically to try to fight against... Yeah. Who the fuck is Jimmy? Yeah. It's... what's that, Pol Pot? Insane? You didn't know? I thought Hot Pot? No. Okay, let's read this article. Jimmy Carter is a liberal saint now, but was a war criminal then. So let's read a little bit about Jimmy Carter's history, because I think a lot of people seem to forget what he did and who he was. Let's see. Jimmy Carter's family recently put up a public statement that he was in a home hospice after years of fighting and beating cancer and other ailments. Since then, he's been a national outpouring of thanks for Carter's lifetime of service, and it's been a well-deserved. His post-presidency has been admirable, indeed inspirational in many ways. He helped build housing for the poor, spoken out against the power of business class, opposed wars and broken peace agreements, overseen foreign elections, and even called out Israel's apartheid regime in Palestine. All good things. No representative of the ruling class like an ex-president has ever shown such empathy and transformed himself into a model of progressive ideas like Carter has, and he deserves praise for it. Carter's legacy, however, is not so clean-cut. His admirable post-presidency in many ways was a clean-cut operation for ways he transformed American politics and then the damage he did as a president. The inspirational ex-president was, as president, a pivotal figure in the abandonment of the New Deal policies, helped give birth to neoliberal austerity, made the country more and more conservative, and mostly followed an aggressive foreign policy that reinvigorated the Cold War in the 1970s. Carter's entire career needs to be discussed when considering his life, not in order to smear him out of anger or caprice, but to point out that even someone treated like a secular saint since 1980 acted like a typical representative of the ruling class as interventionist and an oligarch when he held state power. I'm gonna take a little nap. Good night, Callie. Thank you for stopping by. Yeah, politician bad? No way. He regretted all this. Yeah, he did. And that's why he worked so hard to try to fix it. But the point is, it's very important. Like, I'm not saying like we should disrespect Jimmy Carter's legacy at all. But I'm saying it is very important for us to remember that human beings are complex and multifaceted, and that we should never fall into a realm of thinking that any individual can be perfect, is perfect, or should be hailed as like an amazing person constantly. Everyone had flaws, and everyone has good things that they do, right? It's important to just break ourselves out of that mindset of good versus bad. That's what I'm basically trying to relate here, is that there is no good versus bad. There's no pure evil versus pure good. There are genuinely really bad people and they're generally really good people, but there is a lot of gray line. There's a lot of mess in the like all mixed out throughout this. And no lies, everyone is infallible and perfect. I think it's something that people for some reason don't like talking about. It's very unpopular to talk about how the complexities of life, the complexities of people, and the complexities of how a human being's life takes place and the things that we do across it. And it not being like fucking Star Wars. Like, life is not like a Marvel comic, chat, where there's good guys and bad guys. It's not like Superman. I am perfect. It's important for all, especially left. Too often the left looks for heroes like it has with Carter. Left media is currently giving immense amounts of space to conspiracy theories, hoping to make us believe that John F. Kennedy was killed by his own deep state because he was going to withdraw from Vietnam at the end of the Cold War. See John F. Kennedy Goes Hollywood, Oliver Stone's Fantastic History. More recently, The fans of Bernie Sanders, an admirable and establishment politician, as you'll find these days, but essentially an old-school liberal, have put him forth as a savior of the disposed. But JFK and Bernie, like Carter, weren't heroic, and American politics has drifted ever rightward from the early 1960s on to today. Organizers and activists need to be lifted up, not presidents based on their romantic notions of what they did or were going to do, or what they did after they left office. Very true. Very true. And so an accurate reckoning of Jimmy Carter's legacy and president is imperative at this time. A hagiography begins to replace analysis in looking at his life. At home, Carter embraced neoliberalism. I can say words. Pro-business economic policies, deregulation, and ultimately austerity. While the governor of Georgia, he was introduced to corporate leaders from Coca-Cola and other companies, and then mentored by David Rockefeller, who brought him into the Treadwell Commission and took him on junkets to various countries where Carter received his education in global politics. Along the way, he began to take a role in national democratic policies and was leader in the 1972 Stop McGovern campaign at the Democratic Convention that failed but clearly showed the rightward direction in which the party was headed. Because remember, this was also the era of vicious anti-communism and a rejection of anything even that was close to communism, right? It was anything that if you even fringed on an idea of socialism, of the idea of healthcare is a fundamental human right, that workers should be compensated properly for their work, that that the people had rights and not the corporations, you would very often be painted as a commie. People would say that you were a bad person, that you were they would report you to the local authorities. This was a bad time. It was a really bad time in American history. It sounded like kind of a commie there, Arthur. Oh man. As President Carter was not as friendly to organized labor as Democrats had historically been. In 1977, when the Youngstown Mills shut down and a coalition of local activists led by Stoughton Lind was communal leaders tried to find a way for the workers to gain a say in company decisions and keep the plants open, Carter offered no help. He also believed that the traditions of the New Deal regulations had passed their date of effectiveness and believed that the market, not congressional law, should guide business behaviors. Thus, that was the beginning, right? Everyone forgets that, yeah, Reagan was the downfall of corpocracy. That was when him and his trickle-down economics was when things started to truly spiral out of control. But Carter before him was also slipping into those same policies. He was it was already trending in that direction before he went as extreme as he did with a lot of his policies. Thus, as President Carter deregulated key industries like airlines, natural gas, trucking, banking, and railways, he appointed Paul Victor to head the Fed in 1979 and brought on Volcker stocks, which led to soaring inflation and then austerity budgets. And those were a big factor in Carter's loss in 1980. Carter's domestic policy cabinet choices often came with the blessing of the corporate community, and Carter himself, in his memoirs, admitted, "In many cases, I feel more at home with the conservative, Democratic, and Republican members of Congress, even though the liberals vote with me much more often." While liberals and the left condemn Reagan and the profound shift, there's much to condemn about Reagan. The reality is that the evolution toward neoliberalism and unregulated markets took off under Carter. And that's where we are today. Okay, but was Carter based? No. And that's where stagflation began, right? Those policies directly led into Reaganism and stagflation and our loss of revenue and income. That's when corporations started paying us less and paying themselves more. This is actually a history lesson because I knew nothing about Carter. It's fascinating because the thing is, a lot of this stuff is not stuff that you really learn. It's not stuff that you really learn. It's not really stuff that's taught to you in schools. It's like actually reading the history of presidents is fascinating. Sounds like he was kind of shit. Yeah, so here's the reality. He was good in some ways and bad in others. like many presidents throughout history. Remember, we look back on Obama negatively now, when we looked at Obama positively during his tenure as president. There's a lot that there's a lot of flip-flopping that, but the reality is the majority of presidents are just like a mixed bag of some good and some bad policy. As bad as Carter was during his presidency, no one beats Reagan for destroying the country. We are still feeling a lot of the stuff Reagan did to this day, and at least Carter did a lot of good work afterwards. Yeah, like that. But see, that's the point I'm making. See, this is the point I'm making, is that he was not a bad person, but he made mistakes, and he fucked up things, and no individual person should be held up as an icon, as virtue. That's the point I'm making here. In EU, we basically know nothing about half of the U.S. presidents except for the current one. I still think look at Obama positively, at least compared to what followed him. That's true, yeah. But, I mean, remember, Obama extrajudicially murdered thousands upon thousands of people through drone strikes that he directly signed off on. And many of those drone strikes would kill innocent civilians. And even after, like, hundreds of innocent civilians were killed, they still kept green-lighting the drone strikes. Yeah. Just like in Australia, our previous prime minister will be remembered for shitting himself at a McDonald's. Yep. In foreign policy, the bigger focus of this essay, Carter's record is equally problematic, and his policies upended Nixon-era d'entrée, abandoned arms control progress, increased military spending, and led to an interventionist foreign policy with the U.S. Funding armed militant right-wing groups in Afghanistan, Central America, and Africa. That's huge. See, that right there is fucking massive. The beginning of intervention, I mean, honestly, I think interventionism started even before him, of funding various different groups, but he did continue it. He continued the funding of groups that destabilized other countries. Because remember, the anti-communist rhetoric, and let me be very clear. I'm not pro-communism. I personally do not think that communism can function on a large scale. I think that the inherent flaws of communism cause it to be easily corrupted and manipulated by individuals who are put in power within communism. And so it is communism does work and can work on small scale. Absolutely. In smaller countries and in smaller groups of people, communism can be a fantastic system that functions. But as soon as you scale, communism is unscalable. It has been shown to be unscalable every single time it's been implemented throughout the entire planet. It is a mixed bag policy. But I'm generally anti-communism. Hi, Potato Queen. Thank you for the resubscription. But the realities of anti-communist sentiment in America were the way they genuinely thought that the concept of communism was like a plague. That it was like a plague where it would infect countries and infect countries around them, and that it would, like, communism would start spreading over the entire world, and eventually that America would be taken over by communism. That's what they thought. They treated it like a virulent plague, and so they used violent means to try to snuff out communism wherever it was popping up. They would murder duly elected representatives. They would murder presidents. They would throw entire countries into war, civil war, and disarray just to try to stop communism from popping up in that country, even if it was completely functional within the context of that country. It was a horrific policy. The U.S. should always be criticized for this. I learned how communism works through Karl Marx, a Chinese animate. It was effectively a scapegoat for other rhetoric, too. Yeah. So, it was some heavy psyops. Yeah, and so, we should never forget that, right? Never forget what all of this did to millions of people. Millions of people lost their lives. Millions of people, even tens of millions of people, to hundreds of millions of people's lives were absolutely ruined. Generations of people had their entire lives ruined and upended by American interventionism. It's horrific. How much of South America or Africa did America fuck up just to slow the speed? Yeah, so much. South America, the history of South America and Africa is a history of just being completely regressed, and 90% of the reason is American interventionism. The way I see it, the communism and capitalism of the Soviet Union and the USA were pretty surface level. It makes more sense to see them like two global superpowers competing for dominance. Yeah, that's also true. Let's see. Carter does deserve credit for brokering the Camp David Accords. Through their long-term benefit has been minimal, and for establishing the One China policy, which is currently being abandoned. But if one believes, as I do, that Noam Chomsky's depiction of America's post-war presidency as war criminals is accurate, then Carter surely is part of that rogues gallery as well. Carter might be a secular saint to many in the 21st century. But when it came to engaging with the world during his one-term presidency, he was a war criminal and set the stage for many of even worse policy crimes in the Reagan era. In Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, Carter created violent programs, aided terrorists, and contributed to death and destruction at a high level. His stewardship of the crisis with Iran, one he contributed to with his support of the Shia, made the situation worse and more dangerous. In all, his stewardship over foreign policy in the American empire also is instructive in the ways that liberal militarism and imperialism work and how core principles in American politics. And this is from Budgets and Militarism. In the imminent post-Vietnam era, U.S. military budgets naturally decreased. But in 1978, Carter put a halt to that and began giving the Pentagon more money, again proving a transition from the immense spending of the Reagan years. He also put belligerent Kissinger wannabe Zbigniew Brzezinski in charge of a foreign policy and consistently made the Secretary of State, the more moderate Cyrus Vance, less important. As of 1979, the Washington Post article explained, business is booming for most of defense contractors in this country and will stay that way. Yeah, this was the beginning of what we now have in America, the $1 trillion budgets, right? Did you know? So I know there are a lot of Australians and there are a lot of Europeans in chat, but did you know that America spend more money on our military than any other country on the planet, aside from, I believe, China is catching up to us right now. But we spend $1 trillion a year on our military. $1 trillion fucking dollars. That's fucking crazy. That's so much goddamn money. It's a ridiculous amount of money on guns and bombs. It's true, and I think a lot of it is also Cold War mindset in general. Yeah, it's literally was played up as good versus evil through and through in society. Yeah, exactly. That was one of the biggest problems. Oh yeah, how was Danganronpa 2? Did you guys finish it up? I finished it. It was. Oh yeah. Oh, you love that ending? Did you like that ending? That ending's awesome. I can buy you at least one car. War has been our greatest export always, Arthur. That's true. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. America's greatest export has to the entire world has been war and guns. We're very good at it. This is the view of the executive suites of the aerospace industry as well as the cubicles of the Commerce Department, where analysis have been going over the sales figures on planes, ships, missiles, and tanks. Business hasn't been as good as this since the late 1950s and early 1960s, says James W. Biggs, Executive Vice President of General Dynamics. That's fucked. That's fucked. That is absolutely fucked. Had to drop a couple billion on stealth tech. Yeah, just out of nowhere, just because we feel like it. We do a lot of our success to the military industrial complex, whether anyone sees it as good or bad. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, like at least our economic growth that is. Okay, so from the Indonesia East Timor, contrary to the widespread belief that the U.S. looked away as Indonesia slaughtered tens of thousands in East Timor, an ex-Portuguese colony it sought to annex, the Carter administration provided heavy support, military, financial, and diplomatic, to Jakarta. Indonesian troops in East Timor were armed roughly 90% with our equipment. The Department of State acknowledged, and they ran out of military material with their escalating operations. Carter authorized additional arms sales of $112 million for 1978, and Vice President Walter Mondale visited Jakarta to announce new arms sales. Throughout, the Carter administration denied that the situation in East Timor was dangerous. Yup. We memory hold East Timor. Oh, man. Well, let me make sure I'm catching up on what you guys are saying, too. As a comparison, Canadian military budget in 2020 was $23 billion. Yeah. Which is, what is that? That's a fucking, that's like 5%. It's so tiny in comparison. Let's see. From Anglor, a Marxist group, the People's Movement of the Liberation of Mongolia, began a war of national liberation, which resulted in independence in 1975. South Africa refused to accept the African refused to accept the MPLA victory. So, supported by the U.S., intervened against the new government with Army, Naval, and Air Force units, with armed provisions by Washington, D.C. and other Western governments, as well as mercenaries funded by the CIA. With Cuban aid, the MPLA eventually pushed South Africa out of Angola, but then South Africa funded a counter-revolutionary group, the National Union for Total Independence of Angola, which had fought alongside the MPLA until 1975. President Carter's cooperation with China made a deal to provide... So that's not good. President Carter, cooperating with China, made a deal to provide UNITA, led by the notorious warlord Jonas Savimbi, a one-time member of the MPLA with Mahoit's roots, with 800 tons of 800 tons of weapons. What the fuck? To fight against the new popular government in battles which included conventional warfare, air attacks, and raids on Swapo refugee camps, as well as a massacre at Kenzana in 1978, where U.S.-backed forces killed 800 people. Through the UN called for an end to Pretoria's intervention and Namibian statehood. Carter and his incoming Reagan administration continued to send weapons to South African and UNITA forces. Tons, 800 tons, yeah. Ridiculous. Okay, in Vietnam, Carter said that the U.S. had no obligation to help Vietnam after the war because, quote, the destruction was mutual. What? In one of his... Brother, you're the ones who brought the napalm! What are you talking about? What do you mean? In one of his first press conferences in 1977, and continued to assault the new socialist government in Hanoi, blocking its attempts to get promised reparations from the U.S. or aid from international agencies like the IMF or World Bank. After Vietnam intervened in a Cambodia to oust the murderous Pol Pot Khmer Rouge government, Carter continued to recognize the bloody Khmer Rouge as the legitimate government of Cambodia. What? What? Bro was so fucking socialism brain rotted that he supported someone who literally on document at the time everyone knew, and even in the mainstream media, was a fucking genocider. Because socialism bad? What the fuck? Yeah, literally supported the guys who did the Cambodian genocide. Holy fuck. That's crazy. He then, as in Angola, began cooperating with China again to do something about it. In a January 29, 1979 conversation with Deng Xiaoping, Carter expressed his desire to punish Vietnam by encouraging other nations to reduce aid to Hanoi, as long as the Vietnamese are the invaders, increasing military aid to Thailand, reaching out to Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASPAN, members to unite against Vietnam, now the SRV, while warning the Soviet Union that continued support of Vietnam would harm relations with America. I'm pretty sure it's not pronounced like that. Oh, well, I'm stupid. Listen. Deng expressed his concerns over Vietnam as well and told Carter that, quote, some punishment over a short period of time will put a restraint on Vietnamese ambitions, and that, quote, we need your moral support in the international field. The American president understood clearly what China intended, but cautioned that, quote, invasion of Vietnam would be very serious destabilizing action. Deng reassured him that, quote, we have noted that what you said to us and that you want us to be restrained. It is not that we did not consider this. We intended a limited action. Our troops will quickly withdraw. We'll deal with it like a border incident. Oh, great. Wait, did you like that Carter did besides pardon draft dodgers? If they let socialism work, then people will see it work and will want it. We will want it, and we can't anger our corporate dads and threaten their capitalism. True. Carter said no more, and so on February 17th, 1979, hundreds of thousands of Chinese troops struck along the Vietnamese border. The incursion did not last long, about a month, but it was costly to both countries, and the Chinese had about 2,500 or 25,000. Numbers are hard, or more killed and over 40,000 wounded, and the Vietnamese had about 10,000 killed. Financially, however, the toll on Vietnam was greater. The burden of fighting against China right after intervening in Kampuchea, okay, and the immense occupation cost of keeping Pho under control would plague the SRV economy for years, making reconstruction immensely difficult, if not impossible. Which, of course, that was his plan, right? We're not even halfway done with this. Yup. Nicaragua and the Contras. Through the Contra War and U.S. destruction in Nicaragua was mostly a Ronald Reagan product, Carter set the stage for later intervention in the summer of 1979, with the Sandinista Revolution made its final push to take over Managua and then dispose Somoza in July. Earlier, when the Sandistas were in a larger popular front group, Carter insisted it take a more moderate position, which prompted the FSLN to leave the coalition. Then, in June, he directed Cyrus Vance, the Secretary of State, to urge Somoza to leave but be replaced by a broad-based government and the OAS peacekeeping force, conditions that would deny a Sandinista victory. Once the FSLN took over on July 19th and began receiving aid from other socialist states, Carter authorized the CAA to support the resistance forces in Nicaragua, the genesis of the Contras. Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, for those who don't know what the Contra incident was, basically, the CIA was selling drugs. They were selling drugs in order to get money to fund weapons that they then sent to the Contras to destabilize the region. So just doing a big evil in every possible way. And who authorized the first throes of this? Jimmy Carter. Oh, man. Cambodia like a song, goddammit. Listen. In Iraq. When you try to do something at any cost that is a price tag balloon, yeah. Iraq, though there has been no official document confirmation, various Middle Eastern politicians and diplomats have maintained that Carter had State Department officials reach out to Saddam Hussein, who had longstanding grievances and skirmishes with the new Iraq Republic of Iran, to encourage him to ratchet up Iraq's pressure and aggression against Tehran. In the aftermath, Iranian hostage crisis, the failure of an armed rescue mission by the U.S., and increasing hostility from the Khomeini government, the claim is plausible. While proof of the green light to Baghdad to start the Iran-Iraq war is still speculative, it's clear that the Reagan program to support Baghdad against Khomeini did not emerge out of nowhere. Afghanistan and the Mujahideen. In Carter's most militarist, hawkish, and ultimately consequential move, he intervened heavily in Afghanistan after the Soviet intervention there in Christmas of 1979. He took a hard line on Soviet involvement in Afghanistan, which removed the bloody Hasfulia Armenian government in favor of a more reformist Barbak Kemal faction, in spite of the likes of George Kennan and in the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal, urging caution, comparing Moscow's relation with Kabul to the American role in Guatemala. In short order, he then decided to boycott the 1980s Olympics, scheduling for Moscow and dramatically increasing military spending for 1980 and 1981, providing a prologue and rationale for Reagan's even more immense buildups. And as Islamic fundamentalists from throughout the region poured into Pakistan to fight against the Soviet-backed government in Kabul, he began funding these Mujahideen groups and famously sent Brzezinski to the Pakistan-Afghanistan border, where he told the fighters that God is on your side. Then they would defeat the Kemal government. This, of course, led to the most stark example of blowback in the era, the ultimate creation of Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. Yeah, that was a direct line there. Yeah. So Carter had been unique since he left office in his dedication to peace and justice, especially in supporting Palestinian rights. See the book Palestine, Peace Not Apartheid. Helping broker a nuclear agreement with North Korea, and including the idea of human rights into foreign policy considerations in places like Argentina during the Dirty War. Especially compared to many other recipients, Kissinger, Bering, Obama, his Nobel Peace Prize in 2002 was well-deserved. You won't find two ex-presidents more unlike Carter and Donald Trump in terms of their personal ethics and morality. Yet, as caretakers of the American empire and military-industrial complex, they acted more similar than not. So Jimmy Carter, with some differences, also operated within, maintained, and strengthened Americans' hegemony and imperialism and global instability during his time in office. His presidency is a great study in the structural imperatives of the American government and liberalism, and how even people with a good heart are war criminals when conducting affairs of state. Yep. That's it, chat. That's the reality. This is the reality, and that the point of reading this, the point I'm making here is that because it can be drawn into a greater context than not just a political context, that good people can do bad things and bad people can do good things. Things are not always blatantly smeared black and white. There are definitely black people and there are accidentally. Oh, okay, let me recontextualize that. There are absolutely good people and there are absolutely bad people, right? The people who are more good than bad and more bad than good. But to try to always turn everything into, turn everything into some kind of a Star Wars comic book, good versus evil, dichotomy is very dumb. It's very dumb, and it is it's lowbrow, and you should try to challenge yourself and think about things more dynamically. Basically, that's just the point of what I wanted to talk about with Jimmy Carter. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk on that. Never thought I'd be taught American political history by a cute femboy imp with a fart fetish. I don't have a fart fetish.